Welcome back to the In Between podcast and another solo episode. I wanted to do a little catch up of something fun that happened to me actually because of this podcast in December. So, if you remember from, I believe it was season 2, I had Inball on the podcast, who is the founder of the Like Minded Collective. We will link the episode in the show notes so you guys can listen to that. Anyway, she's an incredible community founder and she has a virtual community and then she also has an in-person community in the OC. And so I got the pleasure of speaking to her community in California in December, and I talked all about social media and the importance of storytelling on social media. And in preparing for that experience, it was one of my first speaking engagements since starting my business. I learned a lot about myself. I learned that I need to lean into not pressuring myself to practice a lot. I'm not somebody who needs a lot of practice before public speaking. Now, I'm not Tony Robbins here, so maybe when I get to that level, I might need like a couple more rounds than I had here. But this was a very low key, just an incredible group of women. And so that's probably why my confidence was so high. But going into it, I remember driving there and I was like, oh my gosh, I only had ran through it like 2 or 3 times before I had the presentation. I obviously created slides and I spent a lot of time on like the content, but not necessarily like the speaking of the content. And what I realized is if I lean more into my confidence, that's what will push me through, because no matter really what the content was, if I was showing up confident, the content was going to land for the women in that room. And that is what happened. Like the content was great, but the confidence is really what showed through when I went and presented to them. And so after that experience, I was asking myself like, okay, how did I develop the confidence? And maybe it's something that's innate in that situation. Some people are good at public speaking, some people don't like it. But how did I develop the confidence to know that about myself? And I think confidence is a wild thing, and we could sit here all day and talk about it, because a part of confidence is how you're raised and who you're raised by, a little bit of nature versus nurture, if you will. But as you grow up, as you become more self-aware, probably after your teenage years, you can develop confidence on your own, and you don't necessarily need to take everything that you learned maybe from your parents or your caregivers. You can become a confident person. And so I was asking myself, how did I become this confident? I have always felt very confident in myself, but I definitely went through some years where I didn't like myself or I didn't feel as confident. And I have moments like that all the time. I think one of the biggest things that I learned was in therapy, inner dialogue. I think the most confident people are having positive conversations about themselves in their head. If you don't like you, then other people don't like you because you're telling yourself that other people don't like you. So you have to have conversations in your head that are positive, that are telling you every day that you're beautiful and you're smart and you're kind. I think about my nephew. He's 2. And every chance I get, I'm sitting there telling him how handsome and smart he is. And I believe it, right? And he believes it, because he's 2 and no one's told him any different. But I imagine 2-year-old Cassidy, I'm like, she is so beautiful and so smart and so cool. And so having those conversations with yourself daily is so important. And it's putting those reps in. Like over time, the more that someone would sit here and tell you how smart you are, the more you're going to believe it. And so at first it might feel uncomfortable, but when you work that muscle, it gets stronger and then you start to develop confidence. And then having people in my life that reaffirmed what I was telling myself, right? So I am a successful business owner. Okay, let me put myself in a room where people believe I'm a successful business owner. And when I did that, and I was also around other successful business owners, now the only version of me is a successful business owner. That's the only way and the only version I believe in myself. And so looking at who I surround myself with and what they are saying about me and to me, when I come to them with a problem, when I come to them and I say, I don't think I can do this, what do they come back and say to me? Do they say, you can do it? Or what makes you think you can't? Or Do they offer solutions that maybe I haven't thought of, or do they put me down? So looking at those people and asking myself, how do they make me feel? And after I'm with them, what does my internal dialogue say? Because sometimes you'll have a conversation with somebody and it will feel like now you're talking negative about yourself. Is that really how you feel about yourself? Or is that based off of the conversation that you just had with that person? I think that the inner dialogue, evaluating who I'm surrounding myself with, is the key to how I personally develop my confidence. But I want to give a couple tangible tips if you're like, those things are great, but I don't know how to talk to myself kindly, or I don't know if my friends are repeating those things back to me in a kind way. What are things that you can do? How can you develop your confidence? I'm a how girl. I really appreciate a to-do list and a tangible, actionable steps. So one of the things that I remember doing, literally probably the first time I did it was in my senior year of high school, are affirmations. I love affirmations cards, but personally, I have a deep love with creating the affirmations within my head. And so I used to wake up every morning and I would write on a sticky note affirmations, and it would be whatever came to my head. I am successful. I'm going to pass my science test. Whatever it was, I would write it down and I would put it on my wall. I probably at one point had 200 sticky notes because I would write one every day. And then some days I would repeat them. I would look at the wall and I would repeat them. I appreciated these affirmations because they were coming directly from me. It wasn't a book I bought that was telling me I was beautiful. It was coming from my head, and it was training myself to believe in those I am statements. If you're struggling with confidence and you're struggling with the conversations you're having with yourself in your head, you need to change the narrative. And one of the easiest ways you can do that is I am statements, because it's talking directly about yourself. And so I encourage you to get a journal. I think it's very powerful to have it actually hung up in your room. So that's why for me, I have some on my wall currently in my room. There's been times I've put them all over my mirror, so I see them right when I'm getting ready. They need to be visually there for you to absorb them and believe them. And then think about it in your senses, right? So like, I'm looking at it, I wrote it, that's, I'm touching the pen, and then I'm hearing it because I'm saying it out loud. Therapy. I'm a big fan of therapy. I think I gained so much self-confidence from therapy because I gained self-awareness. If you are not aware of your patterns, if you are not aware of how you talk to yourself, if you are not aware of how you act with certain people, you will not have confidence because you don't know yourself. You have to know yourself. You would not trust Joe Schmo down the street if he came in and said, I want to be your best friend. So you have to get to know yourself just like you would get to know your best friend. And therapy is a really good way to do it. It's not the only way. It's worked best for me because through therapy, she is able to facilitate a certain level of self-awareness for me. She's able to point things out that allow me to sit back and say, did I actually act that way? Did I mean to act that way? Why did I choose to do that? Creating self-awareness then allows me to be aware of my actions. And when I choose to be different, it brings confidence because I know that I consciously chose to act a certain way, to say a certain thing in alignment with my values. Another great way to build confidence, reading. I think the more you know, the more confident you are. People who read are well-spoken. They have things to talk about. And honestly, you just feel smart. You don't need a degree. You don't need anything. You have so much access to free information through books, podcasts, all certain things. I noticed that when I started reading, I had more to talk about with my friends and people around me, and it made me feel more confident. And also, it's just like, I don't know, it feels sexy to be like, oh yeah, I read this book that XYZ. So find a good book. Also, it doesn't need to be personal development. It doesn't need to be a learning book. It can be completely fantasy, fun. I'm reading a thriller right now. I'm reading The Housemaid, and it's very good. Highly recommend. But anything that you read, I think it builds confidence. Working out, if you have listened to any of the seasons of this podcast, you knew working out was going to be on this. There is something so powerful in showing up for yourself to get your ass to the gym. On top of that, if you choose to do a run, maybe you're choosing to be in a bodybuilding competition or you're just looking towards a weight goal, showing up in the consistency is the number one confidence builder. I was listening to a podcast today with Mel Robbins, and she was talking about how she said that National Quitter Day is 19 days after you start a habit. And that is because it takes 19 days for the task to get boring. And when the task gets boring, people quit. And people don't want to be bored. But we're bored in our everyday life. So why are you choosing to be bored sitting on the couch watching TV versus be bored in something that is actually going to provide you change? And consistency is boring. Consistency is so, so boring. And I am lucky because I love routines. So I love consistency. But showing up for a workout and for 4 weeks straight, let's say you lift the same weight and then suddenly you can put 5 more pounds on the barbell, that builds so much confidence because you know you're getting stronger. You can physically feel it, or maybe you see it in your clothes, the scale, whatever it is, whatever your victories are, but showing up for yourself. I know that since I started weightlifting, since I started running, all these different forms of fitness that I do, I have built so much more confidence. And it's not just external in how I look. It is a confidence in knowing that I worked so damn hard to be able to lift the weights that I lift, to run a marathon, to do whatever I want to do. So highly recommend whatever form of fitness, showing up for yourself. That's the key. It's not the workout. It's the fact that you're showing up for yourself, which is my last and final and most important tip, is you cannot be a confident person if you don't trust yourself. If you don't trust yourself to show up and do what you say you're going to do, you will not be confident. Think about it. If you have a friend, a boyfriend, and they continually don't show up, you don't have confidence. You don't have trust in them because they're not showing up. The same thing happens with your relationship with yourself. The number one way that I built confidence, and specifically in relation to working out, is I do not break promises to Cassidy. And so if I promised myself that I was going to go to the gym 4 days a week, I'm at the gym 4 days a week. I am someone who has a very high level of integrity, and I don't break promises to those that I love, and I love myself. And so if you're sitting here and you're someone who's maybe been saying, I'm going to go to the gym, and then you don't show up, I would ask you, why is it that you keep breaking promises to yourself? What is it about you that you feel that you're not worthy of showing up for? And that final tip, if you can just figure that out, you will burst through your confidence. And the way that you figure it out is you challenge yourself to show up, and show up for 20 days. Don't show up for 19 because we're not quitters around here. You show up for 20 days, you be consistent, and you get boring, and you do what you say you're going to do, because nobody wants a friend that doesn't do what they say they're going to do. And guess what? You're your best friend. You got you for the rest of your life. And so take these tips. We're showing up confidently this year, and ask yourself, what do you want? If you want to be confident, then you have to start implementing and doing the hard things to create someone who is confident. Thanks for showing up, and we'll catch you next time.